Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na ma tu'allimuna wa zidna bifadlika ilman wa ta'liman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. So he says, الرخصة في البول قائما وقرب الناس. Right, so trying to show that it is not haram to urinate standing and not haram to urinate next to somebody. Right, so yes, the sunnah is to sit down, and yes, the sunnah is to distance yourself, go to another room, go to another bathroom, etc. Go further away, but it's not obligatory. So it says, حدثنا علي بن خشرم قال حدثنا عيسى بن يونس عن الأعمش عن شقيق أبي وائل عن حذيفة بن يمان قال كنت أمشي مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فانتهى إلى سباطة قوم. Right, they're an orchard. I believe here it's an orchard, which means موضع يرمى فيه التراب. أوسخ. No, it's not orchard. It's just like a place where there's people throw their trash and things like that. سباطة. قوم فبال قائما, and so he urinated standing. فتنحيت فدعاني وقال لم تنحيت, why did you step away? فقمت عند عقبه, I was standing behind his heel. فلما فرغ دعا بماء فتوضأ ومسح على خفيه. Right? And so we can say, A, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was intentionally showing us that it's not haram to do that. To urinate standing, or B, that in case of a need or something like that, you can do that, and then C, that you don't have to be distant, right? And then why would that be the case? Because it's actually quite difficult, right? If you live a life with other people, it's actually very difficult to always urinate and always defecate somewhere far away from people. Because what if you live around lots of people? What if you're in a tent and you need to relieve yourself inside a tent, right? Or something like that. Like you can't always go out into the rain or into the sandstorm or something like that. It's not something that's always the case. Okay. And then this hadith, it says tuhfa ayn. So that's for jama'ah. Jama'ah. What do you think that means then? Where do you think this hadith is found? Jami' or jama'ah? What do you think that would mean? So that means it's in all of the 6 books. Okay, so he's not saying dal for Abu Dawood or ta, etc. He's just saying ayn. This hadith isn't found in all 6 books. Okay, and so given that it's found in all 6 books, what is the likelihood that they're all narrating from the Sheikh of Ibn al-Jarud? What's the likelihood that they're all narrating from his same Sheikh? It's low. Why is that the case, Ammar? Why are you saying that it's low? Why do you think it's low? They live in different places, right? Okay. And so similarly, so A, they live in different places. Okay. B, if Ali ibn Khashram, right, our author is what is it? Like 307 or something like that? When is he passing away? Something like that time, right? So let's imagine he studied this hadith, right? If he was lucky when he was 20. Okay. So probably in like 270, 280, something like that. Okay. So this Ali ibn Khashram was alive maybe in 280, 270. Do we find hadiths that are only narrated by one person in the year 270?
No.
No, right? And if we did, it would like, hey, bro, this is off, right? This is really weird. Like this doesn't make any sense. right? So when Tirmidhi or Ibn Jarud or Bukhari or someone like that, they know a hadith, it's only they've traveled all of these different cities. They've studied with hundreds of thousands of people, and only one sheikh narrates that hadith. That's question mark, right? So what you're going to find off the top of your head is it's going to be some people will narrate from the same people as the sheikh. So Ali ibn Khashram is he's a teacher of, I think, Nasa'i perhaps. I've seen him elsewhere, or Tirmidhi. I think Nasa'i. Um, so other people will narrate from him, right? And they will probably, so they may share this sheikh. They may possibly share this sheikh, but they will most likely share this. So Al-A'mash is most likely the madar of this hadith, right? Al-A'mash, right? So this is Al-A'mash. It's common that he could be the madar of hadith. Why not, right? So a hadith like this, that it spreads. So Hudayfa ibn Yaman to to Shaqiq, to Abu Wa'il, to A'mash, possible. Okay? But then it doesn't spread here, that's fishy. Doesn't spread here, very fishy. Right? You have a hadith that is only narrated in Tarikh Dimashq by Ibn Asakir, but you already know that it's weak. Or a hadith that's only found in the Tarikh of Qazwin by Imam al-Rafi'i in the 7th century. That's impossible, Habibi. That cannot be a hadith. Right? It's not going to be a hadith. Or it's weak by definition. Right? And we mentioned that to many of you before. So most likely here, right? You can look at the hadith up. Just Google it right now. You can play Fantaha ila subatati qawmin. You're going to find it all over the place, and you'll probably see the chains all converge around Al-A'mash, or it'll be pretty good if they converge around Shaqiq, right? But it's unlikely that they converge around. It's possible, Isa ibn Yunus, possible, but most likely around Al-A'mash. It's going to be widespread, right? And you'll even find someone like Muslim will have 2 or 3 chains for this hadith anyway, right? Khair. Okay. Karahiyatu taslim ala man yabul, right? So you have this concept of al-karahiyah, that you're not supposed to do something. When you're not supposed to do something, essentially, right, then the Sharia does not recognize it. So in the Shafi school, when somebody gives salams to you and it is haram or makruh, you are not obliged to respond to them because technically the Sharia hasn't recognized the fact that you give salams to them, right? So this sister, for example, he realizes that one of you, for example, isn't married and says, oh, I'll contact him. Assalamu alaikum, brother. I heard you're not married. So a single sister walking up to you and saying, Assalamu alaikum, she shouldn't do that, right? So do I have to respond to her? No, you don't have to respond to her. Why? Because it doesn't count. You're relieving yourself. You're not supposed to give salam to somebody who's relieving themselves. You're eating with a nice, what's your favorite food, Jawad?
Sorry, you stumped me, Sheikh. I
What
wasn't
is your
prepared.
favorite food? Yeah. When you ask him a Zahid what his favorite food is, he doesn't know what to say. Allahu Akbar. Yes, go ahead.
Um, let's say, uh, let's say it's a dish called keema.
Keema, yeah, I know keema, yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
keema, right? So keema, right? This is his favorite food. Okay. So he's eating his keema, he's breaking his fast, he's eating his keema, he's whatever. And you're like, Assalamu alaikum, Jawad. And he just put the food in his mouth, like, oh, wa alaikum salam. Like it's very inconveniencing somebody. You shouldn't do that, right? You don't give salams to somebody who is, always in the middle of a conversation, right? You're like, Assalamu alaikum, right? You don't do that. So now you don't have to respond, right? And sometimes it's going to be wrong to respond, and sometimes it's going to be permissible to respond, etc. So he says, but you don't have to respond. That's the point, because the Sharia doesn't recognize something that is forbidden, right? Even if it's makruh. حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا عبد الله بن رجاء قال حدثنا سعيد يعني ابن سلمة قال قال حدثني أبو بكر وهو ابن عمر بن عبد الرحمن بن عبد الله بن عمر بن الخطاب عن نافع عن عبد الله بن عمر أن رجلا مر برسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو يهريق الماء. He was pouring water. يهريق. Right? This ha is extra. يريق. Right? أراق يريق, and you add the ha in. أهراق يهريق. And you're going to say يهريق with a fatha on it. فسلم عليه الرجل فرد عليه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم قال إذا رأيتني هكذا فلا تسلم علي فإنك إن تفعل فلا أرد عليك السلام. Right? So I'm just just being polite this time, but don't do that next time. Right? Next time I will be excused and I will not respond to you. Okay, so this hadith here, he says هذا الحديث من زيادات ابن جارود على الكتب الستة والحديث أخرجه البزار. Now, why would Bazzar quote this hadith? I just want to go on a tangent and show you exactly the concept of this of hadith that's gharib. Okay, so let's find this hadith. فلن ثم إذا رأيتني هكذا فلا تسلم علي. Okay, and I will show you this hadith in Al-Bazzar. I'm going to show you what Bazzar says. Um, فلا أرد عليك. Okay, here's the self-same hadith that Ibn Jarud is quoting, okay? In the Musnad of Al-Bazzar. So he says, حدثنا عبد الله ibn Ishaq. حدثنا عبد الله ibn Raja. So notice that they say that they share that same sheikh. Okay? Here. حدثنا سعيد بن سلمة. Same sheikh. حدثنا أبو بكر رجل من ولد عبد الله ibn Umar. In Ibn Jarud's chain had the full name. Here it just said somebody from the descendants of Abdullah ibn Umar. عن نافع عن ابن عمر. So same hadith. أن رجلا مر برسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو يهريق الماء فسلم عليه الرجل فرد عليه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم قال لا إنما رددت عليك أني خشيت أن تقول سلمت عليه فلم يرد عليه السلام فإذا رأيتني هكذا فلا تسلم علي فإني لا أرد وعليك السلام. Slightly different wording. Okay, and then you're going to say trying to get to the next page. I'm sure it's loading. So notice this. So notice what he's saying. So then he quotes another hadith, and it merges with that previous hadith from Nafi', okay, from Ibn Umar, أن رجلا سلم على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو يقول فلم يرد عليه السلام. So is there a conflict between these two hadiths? Let's go to the previous one, right? The Prophet was relieving himself and he responded to him. Okay? He responded to him, but he said, don't do it next time. Okay? But it's also from this, it's the same source, not like a different hadith. So basically, he's quoting two different versions of the self-same hadith. Okay? Two different versions of the self-same hadith with a significant difference, where one in which the Prophet ﷺ says, I'm giving siyam to you this time, but don't do it next time. The other one is the Prophet ﷺ did not respond to him, period, to begin with. Right? Let's see what he says. He doesn't mention anything here. So usually what Bazzar will mention, is he will say, he will comment on the hadith. He doesn't mention anything here. But Allahu Alam. So Bazzar, what is Bazzar's book about? Bazzar is about hadith that have problems with it in reality. Okay? So it's not obvious, but it's as if Bazzar is saying the following. Hey, have you guys noticed how like nobody narrates his hadiths? And how people like me and Ibn al-Jarud, we only know it from like this person, Abdullah ibn Raja, right? Like it's not widespread. So Bazzar is collecting, he'll frequently, his collection is hadiths that like that. It's like hadiths that only been mentioned by so-and-so from so-and-so. It's like, that's kind of odd. Why is it that we're at the end of the 3rd century now, but you're the only person who knows this hadith, right? So isn't it odd that nobody knows this hadith? A. And B, isn't it odd that it goes against this hadith? You follow me? Like there's another version of the same hadith, but it goes against it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? So now we go back to this. Right, so here, where was the hadith? So it's exactly the same hadith, isn't it? A slightly different source here, but Abdullah and Raja is the same chain. So you go back to here, where were we? It's different. It's different source here, but it's the same sheikh here. So this person is probably at maybe maybe 250. Maybe this is the year 200. So it's a bit it's on the edge, right? It's a hadith that is on the edge of being weird, of being gharib. Okay? So هذا الحديث من زيادات ابن جارود. It's not found in any of the 6 books, and it's in the Musnad al-Bazzar with basically the same teacher. So it's not widespread. And on top of that, it goes against another version of the self-same hadith. So it's as if Bazzar is saying, hey, guys, just, it doesn't look right. Okay? So it's like this. I asked Sheikh Farid Dingle a fiqh question. He says, in the Shafi madhab, is this halal? So yes. It's like, okay, did anybody else ever say that? No. And he quoted a book that nobody's ever heard. Okay? He quoted a book that nobody's ever heard. And then I asked another sheikh and he said the opposite. So you would say, I don't know, that's odd. Farid quoted a book that we've never heard of. And then this other sheikh and another sheikh said something else. That sounds super odd now. Okay, A, that you're quoting a book that nobody's heard of. That's strange. B, it goes against another narration. Wallahu a'lam. Right? So this is how the muhaddithin work on a individual level. And then what happens is when narrators recurrently do that, you've seen again and again, this hadith narrator, he keeps narrating hadith in a different way to other people. And it's odd, and it's odd, and it's odd. And then the question marks around him gets bigger and bigger until we label him as weak. Wallahu a'lam. Right? So I'm not saying the hadith is weak, but I could do that. And just briefly, where would I look? Right? And just put in your notes, a hadith that's in Bazzar. I just want to do that just for your sake, right? Just as a learning experiment. Hadith that's only in Al-Bazzar. Where would we look? We look in a book called Majma' al-Zawaid. Majma' al-Zawaid. So a hadith that's in Tabarani or it's hadith in Bazzar. I want to find out, is it sahih? Is it what? A kind of general idea of it. I'm going to look in Majma' al-Zawaid, right? I could look in other places as well. Because this hadith to do with halal and haram, so there's lots of places I could look. But I just want to quickly show you Majma' al-Zawaid as well. By Nuruddin al-Haythami. Majma' al-Zawaid. Al-Haythami, not al-Haytami. Okay, al-Haytami, Ibn Hajar al-Haytami. This is Nuruddin al Haythami. Um, okay, let's have a look how we organize it. So what was the hadith then? It was what لا أرد عليك. لا أرد عليك. And I'm not sharing the screen yet. I'm just gonna see. Other words in this thing to look at. I'm just trying to find it in مجمع الزوائد. إذا رأيتني هكذا فلا تسلم علي. فلا تسلم علي. Okay. Okay, and look, one last. It might missed him or can't find it. يهريق. Okay, I can't find it anyway. But that's just note that book down. Jawad, that's 8,000 books you need. مجمع الزوائد by Al-Haythami. So it has books that, so if it's in Bazaar, you should be able to find it. I can't find it. I'm not sure why I can't find it, but it's in Bazaar or Tabarani or Abu Ya'la. You're trying to find out, is it Sahih? Is it, what's the deal with it? Right. Um, one last place. Give me a second, please. I'm going to look in تلخيص المفتاح not تلخيص المفتاح تلخيص الحبير. Okay, so I'm just looking in another place, so my apologies. Another place to التلخيص الحبير. Okay, so he says um, so these are hadiths. There's a book called التلخيص الحبير by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Okay, and so what does he do? He goes through hadiths that are mentioned in Imam al-Rafi'i's Al-Sharh al-Kabir. Okay, so if it's there, then he's going to comment on it. Why is that useful? Because that means any hadith, usually to do with halal and haram, is going to be there because it's a really big book, right? So that's why I mentioned. So here it says, so there's a hadith of Jabir, and the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam marra alayhi rajulun wa huwa yabu fasallam alayhi, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when you see me, if you see me, don't do this, okay? And then he says, وَرَوَى Muslim. So this hadith is sahih, okay? Notice how it's organized, okay? And this is also the hadith, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, this is the hadith that Bazar, right? Notice Bazar quotes this hadith after it, right? So Muslim narrates with sahih chain transmission from Nafi' that the Prophet ﷺ did not respond, okay? Now, Bazar, Abu al-Abbas al-Sarraj, we don't have his book anymore, it's lost, as far as I know. Muhammad ibn Jarud, that we have, they narrate with their chain that we just saw, from Nafi', أن رجلا سلم على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو يبول فرد عليه. Okay? ثم قال له إذا رأيتني هكذا etc. And also Imam Shafi narrates it with a different chain of transmission. Right? وقال عبد الحق الإشبيلي, this is this great hadith scholar from Seville, he said hadith Muslim asah, it's more correct, i.e. there's actually a contradiction here. That's why Bazar is quoting them. Often the muhaddithin, they don't speak in the way that the fuqaha and usuliyin speak. They do things in like, it's like a mechanic, right? You know, like a mechanic, you're trying to talk to him, he's like, they don't give you too much information. So he quoted a hadith, it wasn't very widespread, okay? And then he quotes another hadith that's more widespread and more sound. He's telling you this wrong. ثم قال لعله كان ذلك في موطنين. Perhaps it was in two different situations. Okay? Which is actually unlikely, by the way. So what Bazar is telling us is there's a conflict. The one in Jarud is mistaken. Right? So there's the hadith of Nafi' is one hadith. From Nafi' ibn Umar is one hadith, and it's been narrated incorrectly by this person as well. So this person here, we don't even know who they are really. Right? If you go back to here, this person here is not really known who they are. Right? So this hadith here is odd. And notice how also Ibn Jarud, he organizes it. He mentions the weak hadith, and then he follows up with a sound hadith, and he says, look, حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا قبيصة ومحمد بن يوسف قال حدثنا سفيان عن الضحاك عن نافع. So this is the stronger one, this one that's in Sahih Muslim. Okay? مر رجل على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو يقول فسلم عليه فلم يرد عليه أصلا. Right? So it seems like Al-Bazzar and Ibn Jarud are both telling us, hey, by the way, this hadith here, right? It's it's actually wrong, right? Basically, you should not give salams, right? So anyway, in the Shafi school, we're going to say, what we're going to say? So you say it's makruh to give salams to somebody while you're relieving yourself, right? And you're not obliged to. So even if we said this hadith is sahih, we'd say the Prophet ﷺ is just demonstrating that it's not haram, right? It's not haram. It's makruh. And, right? And, that's all. But the way that muhaddithin are working, they're not going to say, oh yeah, both hadiths are fine, right? They're not going to say what Abdul Haqq al-Shbili said, oh, it's in two places. That's not really what's happening. That's not how they usually work, right? They're going to do what's called tarjih, right? Which is, there's two versions of the story, which is the right story. Not both of them are right, because they're actually from the same source, right? So it's not like, oh, two different stories from Farid. It's two different versions of the same story told by Jawad's son, that he said that when my dad was telling me with Farid, this happened. And so his two grandchildren are narrating the story in two different ways. One of them is right, and one of them is wrong, right? It's not two different stories of Sheikh Farid Dingle, okay? That's how the muhaddithin are working, and Allahu A'lam, that's what Ibn Jarud is showing us, right? This version here. Because it's a different chain with a stronger version of the chain, and he's saying this one's right and that one's wrong. Wallahu A'lam. But anyway, in the Shafi school, we're going to say it's makruh to give salams while you're urinating, and you're not obliged to respond to the salams if somebody gives you salams while you're urinating. Okay, istihbab al-witri fil istinja. Notice the title, right? The title, it says the recommendation of doing an odd number when wiping yourself in an odd number of times. Recommendation. Okay, it's important to understand, and this is something that's lost on many people who study hadith, is they think the hadith is the dalil. Right? The hadith is the conclusion, sorry. The dalil is the conclusion. Or worse than that, the title given to the hadith is part of the hadith. Okay, the title given to the hadith is the fiqh, is the understanding or the person who put those titles there. Okay, that's very important. So you're reading, somebody's reading. So I mean, I will do this, right? I will do this with somebody who listens to hadiths, just because they don't understand what's going on, right? So because they trust hadiths and they don't trust fiqh books, I'll quote a hadith book quoting a faqih. Does that make sense? Like, because you don't, if I showed you a Shafi fiqh book, you wouldn't listen to it. But if I show you Imam Tirmidhi quoting Imam Shafi, you listen to it, right? So the way they think is that basically, if it's in a hadith book, it's right. If it's not a hadith book, it's not right. So the point is here, this is an ijtihad. The recommendation of wiping 3 times. Who put that title there? Was it the sub-narrator? Was it the author of the book itself? Who did it? At the end of the day, this is an ijtihad, right? But the hadith is one thing, and that's something else. Okay. So he says, حدثنا محمد بن يحيى وأبو جعفر الدارمي قال حدثنا روح بن عبادة قال حدثنا مالك. Okay, because you can see the tabaqa here, the generations of where we are, right? The generations where we are. So this is our author. He is a student of the student of Imam Malik. Okay? And again, we were talking about how hadith spread. If Imam Malik quotes a hadith, that hadith is going to spread everywhere. It is impossible that Rawh ibn Ubadah is the only person who's going to quote Malik on this. Impossible. And if it was, we wouldn't believe him, even if he was reliable. Right? If it was Imam Bukhari quoting Al-Qa'nabi, quoting Malik for a hadith, the only Al-Qa'nabi has from Malik, we wouldn't believe him, even if you're Bukhari and even if you're Qa'nabi. We don't believe you. It's impossible. You can't have the whole of the world going to study with Imam Malik and you're the only person who knows that hadith. That's not going to happen. Okay? Same thing with Imam Malik. If Imam Malik's going to quote from somebody that many other people narrate from, that's impossible. Right? So it's important to note that. So here we saw 2 things, that where he is in time, right? So this is the era of Imam Ahmad or Imam Shafi'i, roughly, right? This is his teacher's era. This is him here. So he's here. He's writing from shuyukh who are narrating from Malik. Right? So it says, حدثنا مالك عن أبي الزناد عن الأعرج عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا توضأ أحدكم فليجعل في أنفه ماء ولينثر ثم لينثر ومن استجمر فليوتر. Right? So the Prophet was saying, when you go to the bathroom, when you make wudu, then make sure you clean your nose, you put water into your nose, inhale and get it out. And when you do istijmar, when you do istinja, when you clean yourself with something solid as opposed to water, then do it properly or do it an odd number of times. Right? So yutir can be do it properly, or it could mean do it an odd number of times. So we might say it's wujub. Why not? Why not? Right? If it says, so we could say it's wajib, right, to clean your nose, and we can see it's wajib to clean yourself 3 times. Why not? Or at least an odd number of times, right? So in which case it would be obligatory to either do it 3 or 5 or 7, etc. Wallahu a'lam. So the ijtihad that it is specifically recommended, that's an ijtihad. And that's the Shafi school as well. It's recommended that once you do at least 3 wipes, that you do 2, if you need to do 4, then you do a 5th, even if you don't practically need to do more than that. Right. Khair. So this is a super sahih hadith. Where is it found? Here it says here kha mim sin qaf. Right. So who can tell me? Somebody somebody else who doesn't usually tell me. Who's kha mim sin qaf? Nobody? I know Zafar knows. I know Jawad knows. I know Ammar knows. Yusuf? Kha mim sin qaf. So let's look at an easier one. Meme. Which book do you think that is? Which of the 6 books begins with meme?
Imam Muslim.
Imam Muslim. Okay, so that's that one done. Okay. Now the second letter of one of them is a kha.
Al-Bukhari.
Bukhari, good. Second letter is a sin.
Al-Nasa'i.
Nasa'i, good. Okay. And then Qaf, Jawad,
Qazwini.
Qazwini. Ibn Majah is from Qazwin. Okay. Qazwini. So Ibn Majah is that. Okay, so Bukhari, Muslim, Nasa'i, and Qazwin. Okay, great. So it says الاستنجاء بالماء أخبرنا عباس بن الوليد البيروتي أن ابن شعيب أخبره قال أخبرني عتبة بن أبي الحكيم الهمداني عن طلحة بن نافع أنه حدثه قال حدثني أيوب وجابر بن عبد الله وأنس بن مالك الأنصاريون. Right, so this is 3 people. This is rare. That's not the normal shape of a chain transmission. It doesn't go narrow then wide. Right, so here it says one person that these 3 people told him. Okay, أن هذه الآية لما نزلت فيه رجال يحبون أن يتطهروا والله يحب المطهرين قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا معشر الأنصار إن الله قد أثنى عليكم خيرا في الطهور in the way that you purify. فما طهوركم هذا? How is it that you purify yourselves? قالوا يا رسول الله نتوضأ للصلاة ونغتسل من الجنابة. That's how we purify. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فهل مع ذلك غيره? Anything else? قال لا غير أن أحدنا إذا خرج من الغائط أحب أن يستنجي بالماء قال فهو ذلك فعليكموه. Make sure you do that. Right? Make sure you do that. Right? And this was 39. It was 39. So 39, it said Qaf for Qazwin or Ibn Majah. Okay, Qaf for Qazwini, Ibn Majah. Okay, so general principle: a hadith that's only in Ibn Majah is not likely to be sahih. Okay, so we said in general this book is between Hasan. Imam al-Dhahabi, not us. Imam al-Dhahabi, he said generally, you look at Ibn Jarud, everything is Hasan or Sahih, generally speaking, right? But hadith that's only in Ibn Majah, it's often going to be like, is it actually Sahih or not, right? I've seen this with other sources, this hadith from other sources as well. Allahu alam. So anyway, it's a recommendation to use water, right? So we Shafis, we say it's better to use water. حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا وهب بن جرير قال حدثنا شعبة عن عطاء بن أبي ميمونة عن أنس بن مالك قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يذهب لحاجته فأتبعه أنا وغلام منا, right, بالإداوة, with a container of water. فإذا قضى حاجته ناولته الإداوة فيستنجي. I would pass him the thing of water and he would clean himself. So it tells us the recommendation of using water. Okay. In this hadith, it says 40. It says Kha, Mim, Dal, Sin. Right? Again, it's in Bukhari, Muslim, etc. This hadith is sahih. The previous one, Wallahu alam, is it sahih or not? Okay. It says القول عند الخروج من الخلاء قال حدثنا إسحاق بن منصور قال حدثنا هاشم بن قاسم قال حدثنا إسرائيل. Okay, one of these are the great Iraqi hadith narrators, Israel, right? So this is a noble name. That's our, we have a better right to Israel than other people, right? And that is Sayyidina, what's his name? Who is Israel?
يعقوب.
Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam, right? وعن يوسف بن أبي بردة عن أبيه, right? From Abi Burda. قال حدثتني عائشة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان إذا خرج من الغائط قال غفرانك. Okay. Okay. في طهارة الماء والقدر الذي ينجس ولا ينجس. Okay, so now this discussion of الماء القليل والكثير. Right? So again, these titles are indicative of what, as something mentioned before, that fiqh precedes hadith. So the person writing this book has already studied fiqh with somebody. He didn't just organically write fiqh, organically write hadith. So he's selecting hadiths that he's heard based on paradigms and rules. Where do these paradigms and rules come from? From the fuqaha. Right? He says, Ma al-kathir, al-qalil, etc. So he says, حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا بشر بن عمر قال حدثنا مالك عن صفوان بن سليم عن سعيد بن سلمة أن المغيرة بن أبي بردة أخبره أنه سمع أبا هريرة يقول سأل رجل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال يا رسول الله إنا نركب البحر فنحمل القليل من الماء فإن توضأنا به عطشنا أفنتوضأ بماء البحر قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم هو الطهور فتحة, the purifying, الماء, it is, i.e. the water, the sea is that which whose water purifies, al-halalu maytatu, right? And its carrion is halal. So this hadith, we see it says dal ta sin qaf. So that means it's not going to be on the level of Bukhari and Muslim. Okay, it's not on the level of Bukhari and Muslim, right? But it's going to be, if it's in dal sin qaf, it's in all of the sunan, right? It's an important hadith, right? And it's in Muwatta of Imam Malik as well. So, key concept that I mentioned to many of you before, Bukhari and Muslim have a limitation in that they're too high class. Okay? So, how do I explain this? So, imagine if I got like imagine if I got a Formula One car, right? How much does it cost? How much costs a Formula One, if I wanted to buy like a Formula One car that could drive like 300 miles an hour on a racetrack?
In the millions, at least.
In the millions. Fantastic. So it costs millions of dollars, okay? What kind of fuel does it take? I could just like drive to my local gas station and just like, put in like whatever 91 or whatever it is, 91, 95, whatever.
I would doubt it.
I doubt it, right? You're probably gonna have custom made, like the company, that the guy who designed it for me, right? He probably has his own, like special made fuel for it, right? So it's gonna be really hard to get the fuel for it. What about driving? Can I just like drive it to work, drive it down a country lane? Is it easy? Can I just drive it anywhere I want?
No.
No. So it's basically too good to use. Like I can't afford to put the fuel in it. I can't drive it anywhere. It probably doesn't do very well uphill. Like if I'm imagine driving uphill in a traffic jam, it's kind of like it's too good, right? So the car is too high tech, right? It's probably not roadworthy. You probably can't get a license to drive on the road to begin with, right? So it's not particularly useful. That doesn't make it a bad car. I'm not saying it's a bad car, it's just not particularly useful. So Bukhari and Muslim are a little bit like that, in that the level is so high that there are useful hadiths that are good enough for me to use in halal and haram, such as a hadith that's borderline Hasan, or it's Hasan, or it's Sahih, but not really on the level of Bukhari and Muslim. Okay? But it won't find its way into that book. So, are you trying to write a book on your favorite Formula One cars in 2025, or are you writing a book on the best car for A, having fun with your friends, B, going off road, and C, people driving, or D, commuting, right? So can you see the difference? Like, what do you want to do with it? So when you want to have a hadith that the faqih is going to use, you're going to find it in Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, Nasa'i, Ibn Majah. When you want to find a hadith that is super sahih because you're interested in hadith, go and look in Bukhari Muslim, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. I remember an interesting thing with teachers as well, right? So sometimes one of my teachers said this. He says, you want a teacher who isn't that good. Okay, why? Because if he's too good, he doesn't have time for you. Like he's like the grand mufti of the world. And it's like, it's like, he doesn't really have time for you. But you have somebody who's like a younger, not that amazing teacher. He actually has time for you, can teach you, you can benefit from him, you know? So sometimes things are too good, right? Things are too good. They say it's recommended not to marry somebody who's too good looking, right? Because it causes problems, right? So sometimes things are too good, right? Right? It's just it's like my cat is too cute. Like you got to stroke it, right? It's a fitna, right? Distraction in my ibadah, right? So that the point I'm trying to make is here's a hadith that's useful to me in halal haram. Malik quotes it. He's trying to prove something. Abu Dawood quotes it. Tirmidhi, in Bukhari and Muslim don't, because it's good enough to use in halal haram, but not good enough for the high class Sahih Bukhari Muslim. So that's why I don't advise people study Bukhari Muslim for multiple reasons. In terms of the Sana'a Hadithiyya, what it's doing on hadith level, you need to be an engineer to appreciate the Formula One engine. You're not an engineer, so don't bother doing it. You're not going to drive it, so don't bother doing it. Right? If you are proper Talib Ilm and you have finished everything, go ahead, specialize 5-10 years in Bukhari Muslim, not a problem. You'll learn tremendous things and you'll be tremendously useful. I'm not saying it's wrong, but for the average Joe, this book is a good book. Muwatta Malik is a good book, right? Tirmidhi, Abu Dawood, a bit long but useful, right? Tirmidhi arguably is the most useful book ever, but it's just too long for many people who don't have that much time. Khair. Okay, so the point is, it's carrion is halal. You can eat anything from the sea, even if it's not slaughtered properly, and it is purifying. Okay, حدثنا محمد بن عثمان الوراق وحجاج بن حمزة الرازي وأبو يحيى محمد بن سعد الأطار قالوا حدثنا أبو أسامة عن الوليد بن كثير عن محمد بن عباد بن جعفر عن عبد الله بن عبد الله بن عمر عن أبيه قال سئل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الماء وما ينوبه, things that come over to it, النوائب الدهر, the problems of life, right? ما ينوبه من السباع والدواب, right? سباع, predatory animals, so the default is they're going to have najasa in their mouths. والدواب, right? قال إذا كان الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث, right? So this hadith, remember we were talking about the different approach, right? The different approach to fiqh, right? So here, for example, the Malikis come along and say, we never heard of that, right? So Imam Malik would be like, I am the grand student. of Ibn Umar, right? If this hadith were a hadith, I'd know it. Nafi' never told me this hadith, right? So here it says, right, the Prophet was asked about water, and he says, if water reaches 2 qullas, about approximately 216 liters, it doesn't become filthy, right? And then vice versa, if it does become filthy, if it does reach 216 liters, then it doesn't become filthy again unless it changes, etc. Right? So the approach of Imam Malik is, I don't really care about this hadith. Why? Because I studied with Nafi'. He never told me about any of this stuff. Had that been part of the fiqh of Ibn Umar, right? Because this is here, Abdullah ibn Umar, from his father, Abdullah ibn Umar. He said, that's impossible, right? The Abdullah school is the Maliki school. If this hadith were a hadith, I would know it. Right? That's approach A. Approach B is, are these people reliable? Yes. Are they lying? No. Are they mistaken? No. Okay, then what's your problem? Right? So it's an issue of weighing up probabilities. Imam Malik would say it's a very unlikely this is a hadith. In fact, ridiculously unlikely, because otherwise I'd have heard it from my sheikh. I studied with Ibn Umar, or I studied with Nafi'. He would have told me. Right? It's not a hadith. It's a mistake. Right? So that's one probability. The other probability is maybe he didn't tell you everything. Maybe he didn't know everything. The default is somebody's reliable, they're reliable. And so there we go. So I'm interested, are they reliable or not? Right? And so it says here 43. Dal Sin. It's in Abu Dawood and in Nasa'i. And it just says there's some kind of mistake here at this point 3. Yeah. Okay. So see the different approaches. So for Imam Malik, it's again there's no definition of a lot or little. If water becomes filthy, that's it. For the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis, we say qullatayn, right? There's 2 kinds of water, large and small, and it's defined here by the hadith qullatayn, right? Similarly, the Hanafis, they say this hadith is important. People deal with najasa and bodies of water all the time. It's very important for the average Joe to know something like this. The fact that it's not known is indicative that's not a hadith. Because there's not a hadith that applies to like, oh, a particular name of a door in paradise. There's something that applies to people on a daily basis. Right? Does my bucket of water become filthy or not? People are dealing with water all the time. So the fact that it's not known and it's not widespread, it means there's something wrong with it. Right? For Imam Malik, I don't know that, never heard of it. You can bring any hadith you want, I don't care. Don't come and tell me about Ibn Umar when I am his grand student. Right? So it says حدثنا عبد الله بن محمد ibn Muhammad ibn Shakir قال حدثنا Abu Usama. Same hadith, right? So he mentions yet another chain. وحدثنا محمد بن سليمان القيراطي قال حدثنا أسامة عن الوليد بن كثير عن محمد بن جعفر عن عبد الله بن عن so it's the same one, right? عن محمد ibn عباد ibn جعفر, like Muhammad ibn Ja'far, same person. عن عبد الله ibn عبد الله ibn عمر عن أبيه, same hadith. قال عيسى بن يونس عن وليد عن محمد ibn Ja'far ibn Zubayr. There's a problem with the person's name here. Look. So is he Muhammad ibn Abbad ibn Ja'far? Or is he Muhammad ibn Ja'far, which could be the same person, okay? But Muhammad ibn Ja'far ibn Zubayr. Oh no, they're the same person. That can be the same. But here Muhammad ibn Ishaq from Muhammad ibn Ja'far ibn Zubayr. So he's just dealing with the different versions of his name, and he's saying that's his name. Muhammad ibn Ja'far ibn Zubayr. Right? So there was clearly a problem with the name though. And then he mentions another chain. And this is again a whole thing that kind of takes the whole idea of the kind of Maliki Hanafi approach, is that what you find is sometimes it's not just one hadith that the Shafis are holding on to and that may or may not be right. It's actually multiple hadiths, right? So for example, Imam Malik, he says there's no such thing as istiftah. It doesn't exist. All right, there's not a thing. You don't do istiftah. You say Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. You do not do an opening dua. You don't say A'udhu Billahi Shaitan Rajim. You don't say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. You say Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So, if there was one hadith, it's like, okay, but there's like 7 hadiths, right? 7, all of them are wrong, according to the Malikis, right? All of those hadiths, something like that. Somebody look in Hassan Muslim and other places, there's something like 7 different du'as that the Prophet did at the beginning of the prayer. And you're saying he did none of them. It kind of gets to the point where like, your methodology sounds too far-fetched. If it were one hadith that I'm understanding in one way, you're understanding another way because of Amal Ahmadina, yada, 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 etc., fine. But sometimes it gets a bit too much, right? So here he's quoting one hadith, and he quotes another hadith. It's also Abu Dawud and Nasa'i, right? He says, حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا عفان المسلم قال حدثنا حماد بن سلمة قال أخبرني عاصم بن منذر قال كنا في بستان لنا. Bustan is not an Arabic word, by the way. Okay? It's a Persian word. It means Bustan, the place of a smell, of a nice smell. لنا أو لعبيد الله ابن عبد الله ابن عمر فحضرت الصلاة فقام عبيد الله إلى مقرى, the place where you eat. قرى is food. وفيه جلد بعير فأخذ يتوضأ منه فقلنا أتتوضأ من هذا وفيه هذا الجلد, right? It's made out of leather, which is another discussion. فقال حدثني أبي أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا كان الماء قلتين فإنه لا ينجس. Right? So this is not a second hadith, but it is a similar hadith. Right? So, well, it's the same hadith. It's just a different version of the same hadith. Right? No, it's not the same hadith. So Abdullah, yeah, here it is. So it's basically a different account for the same hadith, from the same tabi'i, quoting the same hadith from different reasons. Okay, inshallah, we'll stop there. So anyway, quotes two chains there, right? And then we're going to see another 2 hadiths that go against what we just mentioned, right? Inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so anyway, in the Shafi school, we have this issue of qullatain. Large body of water becomes filthy through mere contact with filth. Sorry, large body of water becomes filthy by changing, even a small change, from filth. And a small body of water, less than 216 liters, becomes filthy through mere contact with filth. Inshallah, we'll stop there. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Okay, Zafar, how are we doing? How Hanafi are we feeling today? And Asim, am I going to get $10,000 from Ammar or not? Doesn't look like
I'm
it.
feeling very hungry.
Still feeling very Hanafi.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not doing a very good job then. Okay, khair. Inshallah next week.